Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Butterfly Effects podcast. And today marks the start of a brand new analysis series. We're back on home turf, back on supermassive ground, and there's one DPA game that we've still yet to cover. But we're covering it now. It is now Little Hope's time to shine. And, well, what can I say? I mean, I'm going to throw it straight over to you, mate, because we both know you've got some very strong opinions on this game. If you could briefly sum up Little Hope in a couple of sentences, what would you say?
Misery. I can do it for you in a word, mate. Misery. Nah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. So we're doing it part by part. So I haven't finished watching the whole thing again. We're going to be doing, the first section, the prologue, and the first bit with the main cast up into the first curator scene, right? And I'm not going to lie, mate. I'm really going to try and take this kind of analysis and, look at the positives for Little Hope. I have always labelled that this was my least favourite of the four. I wouldn't say I hate Little Hope, but I think it's considerably the weakest. And what I love though is that a load of people out there will defend Little Hope. They will outright say it's their favourite one, or it's not the least worst or whatever, which I respect, and I love the fact that these DPA rooms can split the room and, cause those debates. But for me, it's just night and day, the worst one, and it's not even close. But I am going to try and come into this analysis. I'm going to be brutally honest, but I'm going to try and find the positives where I can, mate.
Emphasis on the word try. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because Little Hope, it's... You know me, right? I'll put story above everything else. And in terms of the story, the depth of the story, the complexity, I said this in the stream, the themes that it tackles, Little Hope is the best out of DPA. When you look at it sort of big picture sort of way. But the things that let it down are the main cast, the characters, and the setting for me. And I know we had a video recently where people really love the setting. Again, conceptually, I like it too. I think the idea of the fog is really cool. The fact that you walk into it and it spins you around and you can't leave. But I don't know, we'll mention this again later on, I'm sure, but I do find that the main cast, I'm constantly comparing against the Prologue family and even the Flashback, witch trial versions. I'm thinking, damn, I wish this was the main cast because the performances seem to be better. I don't know, I just feel more invested when those particular characters are on screen compared to the main five. So it's really a mixed bag. I can see where people come from in their appreciation for it. But I don't know, it's weird, like I say, it's almost like I don't prioritise story in my overall feeling for this game. It's like the gaming experience. And,
Sure.
we're probably, we're going to mention the road walking and stuff, and it can drag a bit, can't it? So
It can, and I think you mentioned a quote on your Let's Play because you recently did that, on the stream on Twitch, and you said something like if you was to sort of pick the most memorable DPA characters, you said that someone from Little Hope probably wouldn't make that list, or at least be high up there. And I have to agree. I don't think anyone from Little Hope really is a top 10 DPA character. I don't think any of them are more interesting than the majority of the House of Ashes. Certainly not the Devil in Me, possibly not Man of Medan. My favourite character out of the five is probably John, and even then I would say he's a CD ranked character. They're just not a memorable bunch, and I think the linearity harms it. I've always said that I prefer Man of Medan to Little Hope, and I think Man of Medan has the branching spot on. The game's just this really beautiful masterpiece of how the branching can segue off into different bits. You get different scenes, but Little Hope, I know we often say sometimes it gets punished by the fact that they both have fake out endings and Little Hope came second. But I think if you do look at the branching, I do think Little Hope's linearity massively harms it as well.
100%. And the thing is, actually, I mean, we literally did a video on this, didn't we? Where I was back in Little Hope and you was back in Medan. And it just goes to show that, like, how over time your opinions can change. Because, yeah, like, and you guys probably know this as well, that in my personal ranking, Little Hope does rank bottom now as well. It's like you can admire like so many good things, but ultimately, like, the gaming experience just falls a bit short. So I'm not saying that it's a bad game by any means. Like, it's, you know, it's still one that I'll cherish because, you know, it's a DPA, it's a supermassive and stuff. But yeah, I think certainly the weakest. But you know what I was going to ask you, mate, is because obviously in my stream I'm doing curator's cut. Have you ever seen a curator's cut of Little Hope before?
I haven't. I've grabbed. We did a curator cuts ranked video, which you very much pioneered, and I kind of had to do the editing for it. So I kind of have gathered footage, and I have sort of seen odd bits. And yeah, I think in our ranking for that, you said as well, Little Hope ranked bottom for that one as well, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I mean, the best bits, from what I can remember, we've probably already covered, like, in this first part. So we'll probably, like, get into it now. But, yeah, Curator's Cut. You know what, actually, quickly before we crack on with the prologue, is that I consciously chose to do lethal difficulty in this playthrough, because I've never played lethal difficulty. I wanted to see what it was like. And I'll go more into when we talk about QTs in a little while, what my take is on that. But as far as the prologue, we absolutely love this prologue. I said on the stream, and I do stand by this, arguably their best ever prologue, even against Until Dawn and The Quarry. Just because of the sheer drama, I buy into the 70s vibe, the character dynamics, like when the mum and dad are full on at one another, like having a proper row, I'm completely buying it. Like, she's obviously concerned about the welfare of their adopted daughter because she's been sticking around with that reverend for 4 weeks after school or whatever it was. He's concerned because of the, you know, the job losses in his work at the factory. Even like the sibling dynamics, like between Anthony and Taylor, I really like that. And obviously you've got like this little girl that feels like a little bit of an outcast. So like what they set up within those first 10 minutes, like I said at the top, I was thinking, damn, like I really wish that we was playing as these characters because they feel so much more lifelike. And the character dynamics, and plus the fact that they all know and love one another as a family, would make the choices, you know, the potentially fateful choices, all that more interesting.
I agree. So yeah, we say that this is not only, yeah, like you mentioned, mate, not only the strongest prologue in the DPA games, but it has to be the strongest prologue, like for supermassive games, for all their choice-based games. Because yeah, like I think the main thing that does it for me, and like House of Ashes kind of does it with Balafil Kurim, you know, coming in later. But it's the whole thing with Tanya's death, isn't it? That you can choose what kind of demon she gets later. And I absolutely love that. My personal favourite is the floating one, but you can also have the burnt version. But I really think it's creepy the way you have that one demon whose like feet hang above the floor. But yeah, and it's just everything, like you said, the acting, you really buy into the family, and it's the sheer terror of the events that unfold. And I don't think I've ever been gripped quite by a prologue like that. And it's almost a harm because the prologue is that good that I prefer the prologue characters, which is unheard of. I never thought there'd be a day in these games where I'd say I prefer the prologue characters to the main cast, because usually prologue characters, you don't have enough time to flesh out the characters. And I think if you're saying the prologue's stronger than the game, yeah, you can praise the prologue, but also it means you potentially have to criticize the main game as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I absolutely love the ending to that prologue as well. So dramatic. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Even though we've got accustomed to the fact of people dying off in the prologue, in my blind playthrough playing this, which is on theatrical cut obviously, I was still so surprised when all of the family but Anthony got bumped off. It's incredibly unlucky, but with like that sort of opera-like music, you know, the house is going up in flames, that shot where you're playing as Anthony and you've got to make the choice, like whether to go to the balcony for it's Tanya, isn't it, not Taylor, or you've got to try the door, I think, or go to Dennis. I can't remember what that was. A beautiful shot, absolutely one of my favourites of DPA, full stop. And also as well, just like the varied deaths, like the fact that, I mean, we'll explore this later on, but there is like if you're thinking about the elements, like how the family die, I think is actually very interesting. But you know, some of the deaths are absolutely gnarly, aren't they? Like with the dad getting crushed, obviously the mum's like choking in the bathroom because she's like been locked in there. You can have Tanya, yes, Tanya, I'm getting muddled up. Tanya can die two ways, obviously getting burnt alive or the hanging. And then you've got that final death where you think, oh, come on, like this guy, maybe he can make it. But then Dennis just plummets to his death and gets like spiked through that fence. So yeah, I really can't look past it, mate. I think the prologue, top marks.
For sure. And the thing you mentioned as well, and I kind of touched on it with Tanya as well, you know, obviously like the demons you can affect, but you're right, it's all of them, isn't it? Like John will later on kind of get that like crushed demon that moves, that scuttles along the ground really terrifyingly, that will chase him. Angela will get like a water-based one, and it's all stemmed from this prologue, and I think that's fantastic.
Another thing as well, thinking about this prologue, and I've literally just mentioned it before about lethal difficulty, but I think I've caught your curse, mate, because, you know, I usually am pretty darn good at the heartbeat sequences. Like, I think the only one to date that I really remember screwing up was that one in House of Ashes when you're planting the bomber's nick, and that was because of a brightness issue. But I don't know why, but for some reason, like, I go to do it, and thankfully it's a prologue thing, it doesn't really matter, but it's when Tanya's like listening at the door to Megan, and I get the first one, and then I'm convinced I'm hitting the A button in the second slot, you know, for the heartbeat, and it then just comes up saying that I've failed. So obviously I know I'm playing this on lethal difficulty as well, and I'm thinking, God, is there actually a point in Little Hope? Because the aim here is that I'm going to try and keep Daniel alive. I know you're going to hate me saying this, but I'm going to try and keep him alive, because I'm still playing it at this point for anyone that's listening. Yeah, but I can't remember if there's actually heartbeat sequences later in the game that are potentially fatal. I can remember one for like a black cat, but nothing else.
I remember one where like Vince cycles at you for a tunnel and you hide down that little underpass bit. But
yeah.
I succeeded that one. I don't actually know what happens if you fail it. So.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, but yeah, well, obviously I'll come to that, you know, later on when I play part 2 or whatever. But the only other thing I've really got to say, because we did miss out the whole bus crash thing at the beginning. I think it was quite neat how like the bus was called Ferryman, and we know that with DPA of this, you know, there are constant Easter eggs referring to other games. So I thought it was perhaps a nice nod to The Devil in Me. I know there was that speculation at the time that perhaps it was a nod to the curator, and actually the curator is the ferryman, which is still possible because we don't know who he is. But I think, yeah, it was quite cool that Devil in Me, little Easter egg in there, because we know, of course, that the ferryman has a role to play in that game. Right, you know what, mate? There is one thing I wanted to ask you, and that is about the whole claw thing. So, you know, when shit hits the fan, you know, she's about to set the house on fire, you know, this and that. We have that moment where the camera pans and she's talking, and there's like this big sort of black claw shadow behind Megan. What's your take on that? Like, do you believe that there is actually like a supernatural element to Little Hope? Do you think that that's Megan's mind because of the trauma that she's clearly suffered under Reverend Carson? Like, where do you sort of stand on that whole thing?
Yeah, I have seen a few different theories, and, you know, quite a number, and unfortunately a lot of them are escaping me right now. But I do subscribe to the trauma and the mental health, you know, element. I think that's something that only she's seeing, and whether it's, you know, some form of depression or trauma, and it haunts her, and it was what's driving her to do these things, such as turning the oven hub on and whatever. So yeah, I think it's that personally. How about you?
I think so. I think considering what the game's about as well, the fact that it's very mental health driven, jumping ahead, we're talking about Anthony, of course.
I think the supernatural element is kind of like a bit of a red herring. We saw them do it with Until Dawn, where, you think that maybe there's the ghosts of the sisters that, going around. But in fact, that when the twist is revealed that Josh is the psycho, you find out there's a much more grounded reason. And I think it's kind of the same beat.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm pretty sure, thinking back early DPA days, they always wanted to give a rational explanation. And that actually people started to turn against that. And I think that's why Little Hope twist took so much of a beating. Because not only did it replicate Medan, but it's like, really, is it just going to have a rational explanation every time? Are we not going to have supernatural threats anymore?
So, which is why House of Ashes were like aliens.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's a massive departure in House of Ashes, but even there, at one point, there was rumored to be like a mind fuckery thing that was meant to be dropped into the plot, but it was taken out last minute. So, yeah, that's all very interesting. But we move on, mate. The curator, and just as a comment from me, like, is it just me, or in like the first early DPA games, like Medan and Little Hope, it feels like you get so much more time with the curator, and I kind of miss it. Like, I think those scenes are so good where he's just sort of giving you the spiel, he's saying some nice quotes, he's giving you like a background to the game, that I really want some more of that back when we start up season 2.
Yeah, like I feel like the curator scenes almost got worse and worse throughout the years. Because I remember Man and Medan started really strong. We'd spend a lot of time with him. Little Hope a little less, and I think House of Ashes was the weakest point, where it honestly just felt like high and by. Because at least with The Devil in Me, we got that cool scene at the end before like the kind of season finale. So yeah, like no, I do agree. Yeah, I really miss those scenes as well, to be honest.
Yeah, we then start with the main game. Of course, we then meet our cast of 5, that being Andrew, Taylor, Daniel, John, and Angela. So I'm going to put it to you, mate. Who is your least favourite character out of the
5? Now, God, yeah. For those that are new here, it is well established who the fuck I hate, as shown by this video. And his name is Daniel. I just hate everything about him, from his lack of depth, his awful dialogue, and just the fact that his scenes are really unenjoyable and boring. Not a fan of the dude, as you can tell, and also by these clips.
He's got his own category.
Daniel. What, Daniel? While we're on the character one, go and fuck yourself. Have a bit of depth to you. You've got like a dad that he like played football. He had a same keyring. That's about as far as your character goes. Your personality is as boring as your red t-shirt. You don't even deserve to be in Go Suck an Egg, because that would be an insult to Egg. You get your own category. And yeah, I hope you're happy with yourself. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Daniel. And to be honest, mate, I'm not a fan of any of these characters, but Daniel gets the brunt of my hate, because I know Taylor is probably like the most hated character because she's bland, but she's also mean. But weirdly, I think having that mean nature gives her just a little more oomph than Daniel, who I just find to be like the most boring, dull character. Like there's like no life, but like in his prologue version in Dennis, like at least had a bit of a music thing where he kept after his records, and there's that like poster where he's got like the guitar, and it's like clearly he's like some kind of musician. But this Daniel, like, he just has this plain red polo, this boring haircut, and I think his dad got him a keyring, and that's as much as I can say for him. But honestly, mate, like, it's not just Daniel. The characters fall flat on all basis, and I always voice this, but it's quite sad for me. But it's Andrew as well. It's Will Poulter, and call it an unpopular opinion, but maybe because, like, yeah, obviously, guys, we said it at the start, there is spoilers in this video. We know what the big twist is. We know that Andrew is the bus driver. So maybe he was going for that. He hit his head and there was this concussion or this trauma, so he played a very kind of like dazed character. But I don't know, like you see like Conrad, Sean Ashmore gets this great performance out of him. I mean, maybe again that is the character that can permit him to do that. You know, Jessie Buckley absolutely does great with Kate Wilder, and then you've got Ashley Tisdale as Rachel. But this Andrew character, just so bland. Like I say, John's my favourite. The only reason being is because he's got a bit of an interesting dynamic where he's the teacher of the group and he kind of like takes on this protector and he sees himself as responsible. So yeah, no, like probably the best. But as you know, we're about to touch in when I start talking about dialogue. I don't think it's great on anyone, to be honest, mate. So yeah, just I'm sorry for anyone who really likes Little Hope, and I've just been sat here bashing it. But we have to be honest, and it is my honest opinion. I just think these are some of the weakest, blandest characters known to existence, in Supermassive Games history, mate.
Yeah, and you know what? Coming back to Will Poulter as well, it's sort of like, we've recently covered The Walking Dead Season 2, and we were sort of lauding the sort of the performance of Michael Madsen with Carver, who had this really larger-than-life character, who had such like a pivotal role in the same thing, and we were saying, he should have been in it longer, and that's sort of what you want, whereas it's such a shame that, like, we've, not saying that Will Poulter's like the greatest actor of all time or anything like that, but do you know what I mean? Like, his acting potential wasn't found here, and I do feel like that was limited by the script. And I feel like that's a perfect segue to talk about what you voice noted me a few times, mate. Basically, this whole scene after the bus crash. Like, talk us through the dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to paraphrase you a bit of the dialogue. So I know I've just bashed the characters there, but it's also the dialogue. Like, the thing is, like, House of Ashes, right? Like, a lot of people would say it's not their favourite DPA game, but, when you're meeting the characters, you've got, like, Merwin and, Jason. They're all bursting with character. And, like, the dialogue's so important to kind of get these characters across. The Devil and Me do it really well. Man and Madan do a half-good job with it. But when we meet the cast, obviously the bus crash just happens. And this is the dialogue. You have Daniel going, "Hey, is anyone up there?" John going, "Daniel, is that you?" John, "Good to hear you." Daniel, "Taylor, you okay?" "I'm good. We're fine too, thanks for asking. You okay down there?" "I'm alright, nothing I can't deal with." And I don't know, that is just, I mean, mate, there's no two ways about it. It's disgusting. It's so poor. It reminds me of, like, when you're a kid and you've got to, like, come up with a play in drama or write, like, a little bit of dialogue for, like, your English. But I'm talking, like, this is, like, secondary school standard at best, mate. And I don't know what the fuck happened. Because the thing is, though, and like the reason I criticise things like Will Poulter's performance is because we know he's a good actor. I've seen him in Maze Runner. I've seen him in like We're the Millers. Like he can act, and it's the same for Supermassive Games. The writing department, they make some great scripts. Like these are the same guys that got us invested in characters, in Until Dawn and like Charlie Lawrence and The Devil in Me that we love. We know they're capable of so much. Yet that is the tragedy that we have received as the opener, which is so key to making us hooked to these characters. And I'm trying to be nice, but I just can't, because I opened your stream up, mate, and I'm like, I'm gonna try and give Little Hope a chance. And that was the dog shit I was served with, and I just was like, I'm trying my hardest, mate, but it's difficult.
You comparing it to GCSEs kid thing, it sort of like reminds me of like the AI.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
AI done some dialogue for that. But no, I do get what you mean. I think I come down like less harshly on it, maybe because I'm not as hard on Little Hope as you in general. Also as well, it's early days. They're still trying to find their feet with DPA. I know I'm making excuses for them, but like potentially that is an angle for it. But I mean, moving on from here, a quick comment from me comes back to QTEs again on lethal difficulty. But in Curator's Cut, you play as Daniel and Angela, and you like walk up sort of like ravine bit or whatever that runs parallel with the road, and then you come to this fence, mate. It is damn near impossible. You know, like those spamming button QTEs. It is damn near impossible to get that on lethal difficulty. I was spamming that thing like no tomorrow, and I failed it twice, and then like John had to then come in and open the fence. So I mean, that's one to keep an eye on as well. I seem to get the ones before, where you just got to hit the button in time. That I was nailing. But heartbeats and the button spams, yeah, very unforgiving, like really difficult to do. So you know what? Where I've said in the past, oh yeah, I might be tempted to start on lethal difficulty in the next game, I don't think I'm actually going to. I think I'll just stick with challenging because it's just, really ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, I struggled with that. Like, I'm not great at timing puzzles anyway, so fast beat sequences aren't for me. But like the idea of doing that on lethal difficulty would just murder me.
Obviously, the characters then reunite once they get through the fence. We then have this whole shindig with the fog, mate, and they're having a little bit of a bicker as what to do. Do you remember who you sided with in this instance? Were you thinking along with Taylor, like, yeah, let's go back to the bus, let's chill there? Or was you sort of with John, who was like, no, come on, let's go into town and go and sort this? Like, what would you do if you was in that situation?
I was with John. I mean, like, it's the middle of the night. There's no point going to, like, a bus that's overturned on its side. I was like, yeah, go in town, find a phone, So, yeah, no, I was Team John here.
No, same. And like I mentioned already, I won't go back over, but I did like the whole idea with the fog. But, yeah, one criticism from me about this particular bit, it does feel like that this scene goes on a bit too long. Like, they even, like, revisit it slightly later on. I'm like, okay, just drop it. Like, you're not going to be going to the damn bus. There's no point. The fog won't let you. What's the point in going there? You're just going to be sat around waiting in the middle of a road. You might as well try and go into town. It's not even like they're even of the idea that there is some supernatural threat there at this point. So there shouldn't really be any reason for them to be scared if they're, at least if they're walking as a group together, But of course, then, mate, we then do rock up to our first destination on this road walking journey, and that's the Black Cat Bar, where we meet a mysterious man at the bar. And yeah, what was your sort of overall take on this scene? And maybe, like, if you remember from your blind playthrough, like, was everybody getting along, or was there a bit of like frostiness between certain characters?
Yeah, I mean, I think they were getting along. I mean, it tacks back a little bit earlier when we first meet Angela, but like obviously she's really frosty with Daniel and Taylor at the start. But like, I don't know, it's one of those ones where I just wish there was more substance to that, because it just seemed like Angela was attacking people out of nowhere and we didn't really know why. Maybe I've missed the trick there, but I was quite confused as to why. And then in the bar, obviously, I looked at your stream and it looked like Daniel and Taylor were having a bicker about something but I don't know, maybe it's me missing a trick again, but I didn't quite understand what they were bickering about. Like, Daniel was like, oh, sometimes I feel like I don't get you. And I was just a bit like, I don't know, if something happened that I've missed here. Like, it went way over my head. But this whole bar scene, though, like, it's one of those ones where, like, it's a little on the dull side. Like, the darts, scene's just a bit of a meh puzzle kind of thing, or like meh kind of like mini game. But it is one of those ones where I do think when the twist comes and you kind of look back at those scenes in the sort of flashback element, it makes sense and I get why it's there, and I do end up liking the scene in hindsight. But to play it's nothing special, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I've literally got this written down here. I do think it's clever how we're meant to think, because we don't know it's Vince, do we, at this point? I think it's clever how we're meant to think that the guy at the bar is the oddball, and that we're the ones sort of like, oh, what's up with that guy? Even the curator like throws a red herring in there saying, oh, that guy at the bar wasn't very nice, was he? Like, when you next meet up with him. So I think that was cleverly done. But yeah, I get your point. I sort of screwed up in my curator's cut because I was meant to look around like I usually do and find clues and things. I think I just headed straight for the exit door, so I can't even comment on what I remember things being in there, like, you know, potential Easter eggs, things to pick up, you know, pictures and stuff. So I was just straight in there and straight out again. And you know what? Actually, to come back to your point about like why characters are off with one another, I think it's layered into the dialogue, and I think as well, we've not come across it yet in the game, but I'll probably ask you about it now. But obviously, Little Hope has like that whole locked trait mechanic thing, and I feel like the dialogue does come into this because I do remember there's achievements for this game. So I think for me, because Daniel decided to go with John, you know, going into Little Hope to search for help, that hurt the relationship with Taylor. So that's why they're bickering. But yeah, like Taylor and Angela, they're always bickering. And I think in my playthrough, John and Angela are getting on well at the moment. So I think it's rooted in the dialogue choices, mate. I think that's where that comes in. I think that then has a turn as to what your locked traits are, especially when it comes to making choices later on in the game.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, we've covered it in another video, but like, I mean, we've mentioned it before. But Daniel and Taylor should just not be a couple, considering like we know who these people are, and they're a stem of Andrew's mind of like his brother and sister. So the fact that it's Tanya and Dennis and they're a couple, it's sickening. So yeah, it's just like, oh, Little Hope, what are you doing, mate?
We head outside, we do some more road walking, and then because we're now playing as Angela, at least in Curator's Cut we are, and we then come to, well, we start hearing Ring a Ring of Roses, which, you know what, as a quick sort of like side tangent before we get into that particular scene, I do wish that Supermassive would lean into scares in-game, if you get what I mean. So like they did it with The Devil in Me, where you're playing as Erin, you're physically walking through the corridor. When the lights go out, you can hear the ghosts or you can hear the voices through her earphone things. I wish that they'd start to build that in more a little bit in their games, because they did this thing with Little Hope with like the road and like the Ring a Ring of Roses, and I thought like it was quite effective to set in the atmosphere, because I think at this point the story's sort of slowly, you know, it's a slow burner, it's taken a while to get going, and it's only from really this point onwards that I feel that it really gets momentum, if you get what I mean. You know, when we have that, we then have like the flashback encounter with Mary and Amy from like the witch trial bit.
No, I agree. Like, you know, I come down pretty harsh on this series, but that is one element of the game that I do really like. Like, obviously, I critique the roads a little bit for being a bit bland, nothing too iconic, but like, yeah, the Ring a Ring of Roses, like, you know, like it's really eerie going down there, and it's nearly as good as the Erin hallway scene. And the flashbacks, I absolutely love them, actually, nearly as much as the prologue. And I don't know, it just felt like a breath of fresh air whenever like one of their scenes came on, and I was just like really invested in like because each time you get one, and we'll see this as we talk about the other flashbacks, but you're kind of like piecing together a puzzle, and they're connected, and there's like a story each time you get one. So yeah, they were like kind of like these like juicy nuggets of like information, and I just was really buying into kind of like that time period as well, the aesthetic, the outfits, and the accents they had. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed the flashback scene.
Another quick positive I want to give as well, which actually happened a couple of scenes before, but like you get funnily enough Daniel like theorizing on like what's happened to them. So like even the game's like quite self-aware, so he says, oh, maybe we're already dead, and you know, this is our souls wandering or something like that. But it was when it got to this bit with like the whole witch trial segment thing, I was thinking, oh, like what is the potential twist gonna be? Like, how are all these connected, you know, how are these characters connected together with like these, you know, people from the witch trial segment? So yeah, it did open my eyes up to that particular bit. And then just as it was starting to get going, it then comes to a curator scene, which is where we are going to leave it for this analysis one, guys. So that's how it works. We're going to be going to each curator scene and then taking a stop. But yeah, do let us know what your comments were. Do let us know what your comments were. What I'm talking about. Do let us know what your choices were in the comment section below, and what you thought of the characters X, Y, and Z. And we'll be sure to read and reply to them. Lad, have you got any other comments on the game before we wrap up?
Nah, let's get it over with. No, kidding. Nah, for real. Like I say, I'm hoping part 2's better. I'm gonna try and come out with the positives. Like I say, my quarrels really evolve around kind of like you say, the setting and the characters. But it's not all bad. There are some goods in Little Hope, and I'm hoping more of them will flood out next week when we cover part 2.
Okay, guys, we will see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.